This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and His power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
Today I want to talk about the pocket call. Some people, you know what a pocket call is? When somebody calls your cell phone and it's an accident. Some people call it the butt call because you're sitting down on your phone and you make a call that you didn't intend. But every now and then, I get a pocket call, if you will. It's clearly an accident. I rush to get the phone. I recognize the number because it's somebody that I know, and I know that they know me. They have my number, but it's an accidental call. And very often when I pick up the phone in that pocket call setting, the person begins to apologize. Sometimes they'll call me back and because they've hung up. And when they call me back, they say, "Reverend, I'm so sorry I called you. I didn't intend to call you, but please forgive me." And I tell them right then, I say, "Look, don't apologize. If I am your accident, that is a blessing for me. If I am an accident to you, you have blessed my life." And then, and often it's a person I haven't talked to in a while. And if they have time, I strike up a conversation with them. And as is the case so often in my life, I seek to look in the Bible for examples of, in this case, the pocket call. And let me share with you a pocket call experience in the Bible. If you open up your Bible, turn to Ruth chapter 3. And in Ruth chapter 3, there's a marvelous story of Boaz and Ruth. And I want to paint this picture for you for just a few moments. And I want you to think about this because, in a sense, the relationship between Boaz and Ruth is like a pocket call. And you may say, "Reverend, break that down for me. How are Ruth and Boaz like a pocket call?" Well, it starts in Ruth chapter 1. In Ruth chapter 1, we learn that Ruth is a Moabite woman. She's been born in the land of Moab. But Ruth becomes a widow in the land of Moab. She's married a Jewish fellow. Her mother-in-law is Jewish. The mother-in-law is Naomi. She has a sister-in-law named Orpah. And the three of them become widowed. And we have to ask ourselves, why were they widowed? Why were they widowed? We don't know. And I think that maybe the men were in war. Maybe there was a pestilence. We don't really know what happened. Maybe they were subject to domestic violence and abuse, but they died. And all of a sudden, Ruth and Orpah, the sisters-in-law, are left without husbands in a world which was defined in large measure by the husband's employment, the husband's viability. And so Orpah and Ruth cling to Naomi, and they tell Naomi, "We will not leave you. We will stick with you." But Naomi tells them, "Look, I'm too old to give you another set of sons. Why don't you go back to your people in Moab? I will go back to my people in Israel, and we can get on with our lives." Orpah thinks about it, and she says, reluctantly, "I'm going to stay here in Moab." But then Ruth clings to Naomi. That's what the Bible tells us. And she says, entreat me not to leave thee or return from following thee. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. And where you die, where I will die also. And finally, Naomi looks at Ruth, and she says, if you really want to follow me, I can't promise you anything is waiting for you in Israel, but come back with me. And so the two women, the older widow, the younger widow, and they make their way back to Israel. And when they make their way back to Israel, Naomi, the older widow, tells Ruth, her young widowed daughter-in-law, she says, you got to work because we have no sustenance here. And she said, by the way, we have a relative named Boaz. And Boaz is wealthy. Boaz has crops. And what I suggest you do is go to Boaz. Go to Boaz and ask him, can you follow the gleaners in the field? And can you work with the women who are in his fields? And see if he will employ you. And so Ruth, the next day, is taken to Boaz. When she goes to Boaz, she says, I am your kinswoman. Can I work with the other young women who are in the fields? Can I glean for you? And can I take some of the crops that I glean? And Boaz tells her, he says, look, I've heard about you. I've heard how you stood by your mother-in-law, Naomi. And because you've been faithful to Naomi, certainly I will give a place to you. And so for a whole season, Ruth follows the men who are gleaning. She is with the women who are following the men who are gleaning. Boaz has already put the word out to the men, do not touch her, do not harm her, but give her the widow's right. And the widow's right is that any crops she could carry, she could have. And so for a whole season, Ruth follows the men in the fields. One day early in that process, Boaz sits down with her at lunch when all the workers have spread their lunch out. And he sits down with her and he begins to talk with her. He asks her about her life. He wants to know what she's thinking about. And he tells her, we all know your history. We have heard how you have chosen to really support and to follow your elder mother-in-law. And we really respect you for that. And nothing bad will happen to you here. And I think that in hindsight, thousands of years later, Boaz and Ruth are sitting down at lunch. And they are really participating in the age-old process of the mating rituals. And when I say the mating rituals, how do men and women learn about each other? And there's even a dating service called It's Just Lunch. And that's what Ruth and Boaz are doing. They're just having lunch. And then you don't hear any more about Boaz and Ruth. But later, at the end of the harvest season, Naomi comes to Ruth and she says, look, Ruth, we can't make enough food. We can't sustain this life. And she said, I'm going to tell you what to do. She said, tonight on the threshing floor, Boaz is going to gather the crops along with the men. And when he gets drunk, when he's had a lot of wine, he's going to lay down and fall asleep on the threshing floor. And what I suggest that you do is that you bathe yourself, anoint yourself with sweet perfume, put on your best dress, your best clothes. Put your hair the way you want it to be. Make up your face. And I want you to go down to the threshing floor. And when you get to the threshing floor, just stand in the shadows. Keep your eyes on Boaz. Watch what Boaz does and watch where he lays down. And when he lays down, let him lay down. Let him go to sleep. And when he goes to sleep, I want you to bend down, pull the cover off of him. And when you pull the cover off of his feet, then you lay down at his feet. And Ruth says, and what should I do then? And Naomi tells her, don't worry what to do. He will tell you what to do. And, thousands of years later, we can only imagine what's going on the threshing floor. But it's part of the mating ritual. And Ruth lays down and she pulls back the cover on his feet. And when he wakes up, he's startled to find a woman at his feet. And he says, who's at my feet? And she says, it's Ruth, your servant. And Boaz is overwhelmed with this. It's an unexpected blessing. It's an unexpected joy. And from that point on, he makes plans to marry Ruth. He says, because you've gone not after younger men, poor or rich, but you've chosen me, an older man. I am just tickled. Maybe she just caught Boaz at the right time of his life. But in life, that was really like a pocket call. It was like a pocket call because Boaz didn't expect it. But somebody looking at this right now has received an unexpected blessing. Maybe you won the lottery. Probably not. But maybe love is coming to your life that you didn't see coming. Who knows? My first day in divinity school, first hour I registered for class. Second hour I walked downtown to buy sheets, New Haven, Macy's. And when I got to the sheet department of Macy's, New Haven, who did I find? That's where I met my wife. And I told my children, I said, when I walked out of the sheet department of Macy's, I walked out with a wife. They said, Dad, did it really happen like that? Well, I said, the truth of the matter is, it took 3 years. But the cast was dyed right then. The die was cast. And the point that I'm making, my friends, is it was an unexpected blessing. And you should not be afraid of the unexpected blessing. If you get a good health report from your doctor, that's an unexpected blessing. If you get things that you didn't anticipate, your children turn out well, don't be ashamed. Don't run from it. Don't discard it. But thank the Lord that things are working out in your favor. If your health has turned out well, thank God. I'm 71 years of age right now, and I had never imagined that I'd feel this good in my life. My fingers feel good. I don't have arthritis. I'm able to move, and I feel good. And it's an unexpected blessing. A couple of old men were asking me the other day. One of them was asking me, but he told me they were talking among each other and asking, does Nick hurt? Does Nick have joint pain? And I say, isn't that something? People will raise questions about you. But I'm 71, and I don't have arthritis. I don't have joint pain. I sleep well at night, and that's an unanticipated blessing. And you know what? I thank God. I thank God that I feel good. I thank God that I'm still in my right mind. I thank God that I can move. I thank God that I can think. And I tell you, all I can say is thank you, Jesus. Thank you for this life. Thank you for this joy. Thank you for this energy. Thank you for this blessing. Thank you, oh Lord God. Thank you. Thank you. In Jesus' name, I pray. God bless. And this day, I want you to consider supporting this ministry. This is a new ministry. I've stepped out in faith, But I believe that with your help, with your offering, I can make it. I want to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. God bless you, God keep you, and know I am praying for you.
We hope you have enjoyed the first portion of today's broadcast. This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and his power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
Hello again, this is Pastor Nick Hood. Thanks so much for sticking with us today. I have with me Dr. Crystal Woods Ollier, the Director of Life Stance Health here in Southfield, Michigan. Mm-hmm. And how are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you filling in with us today. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I've just been preaching about the pocket call. And, as I stated in my message, most of us with a cell phone at some point mm-hmm. receive a pocket call. Mm-hmm. And the pocket call is a call where it's an accident. Mm-hmm. And very often when I get a pocket call, Dr. Woods, Ollier, the other person is very apologetic. And, they're embarrassed. Mm-hmm. And I stopped them. I said, look, don't be embarrassed. I said, if I am your accident, I am a blessed person. Mm-hmm. And we laugh about it. In the first segment, I was talking about the story from the book of Ruth, where Boaz and Ruth end up dating, mm-hmm. they courting mm-hmm. on the threshing floor. Mm-hmm. This is Ruth chapter 3. Mm-hmm. But then they end up falling in love and getting married. But it starts off, at least from the perspective, I think, of the husband, Boaz, mm-hmm. as an accident. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, from a psychological standpoint and emotional wellness, mm-hmm. any thoughts about the accidents? How do we handle mm-hmm. the accidental, mm-hmm. the unplanned in life?
I think what I hear as you're talking about the unplanned and the accidents is your interpretation of the events and how that is the direct connection to how you feel or how you experience a thing. So what I heard you say is that when you get a pocket call, you say, oh, this is a blessing. Because when something unexpected lands in my lap, this is something that God has hand delivered for me so that I know it's for my good. Even if I don't see it right now, I know that somehow this is for my good. So that interpretation allows you to have a positive reaction to this experience and to the other ones, the other unplanned experiences that happen in your lives. When someone could experience the exact same thing and view this as a interruption. And so I was doing another thing. You called me by accident. You interrupted what I did. So then you're going to have negative affect associated with what happened. You could say the same thing about Boaz. So when she approaches him, it's really for him to fulfill the promise that he had as this guardian redeemer. And so he takes that on as, okay, this is the promise I made. This is my responsibility. I feel good about following through with my responsibilities. I do have to go through the chain of command. I need to speak to the first in line. But then after that, I can take on this land and this woman as my wife, as my role as a patriarch in this family. He could have taken that as, now I have the burden of this wife that I have to take care of. Because that is part of it. Ruth and Naomi were in a terrible position at the time. But
they're both widows.
Yes, mm-hmm. yes. Which, especially during that time, without a male to guide you through, it was extremely difficult to go about life. You needed that patriarch. So he took this as, oh, this is a blessing, having this wife here he could have interpreted it in a different way.
You know, I'm glad you made that point. Boaz he's wealthy, he's a landowner, he has animals, livestock, he's got crops.
Yeah, got fields.
And maybe he was one of those people who spent all of his life up to before meeting Ruth just making money. You know, and there's some people today like that. But Ruth meets him on the threshing floor and uncovers his feet. That's all that she does. But evidently, at that time, that was a sign of endearment, a sign that, you know, she was reaching out to him. And his response is, he's overjoyed. It's almost as if he never saw it coming. And, you know, I like to say women are much smarter than guys. She and Naomi figured that out.
Well, they had a plan.
They had a plan. And I think Boaz never had a chance. But once he realized what was going on, he said, oh, you know, this would be a great match for me. And, you know, this whole business of the unplanned blessing, sometimes the negative can also turn into something positive. I've been marrying people for over 47 years, and I can't think of anybody I've ever performed a wedding for who stood at the altar thinking about getting divorced. You know, I just don't think we see that coming. We don't see cancer coming. But through the process, we don't see bankruptcy on the horizon. But, you know, when those negative occurrences happen, we have a choice. We either, you know, resound and retool ourselves in a positive way, or sometimes we just fall apart. And what advice do you give to people who are tempted to fall apart when the negative, the unforeseen happens?
Well, initially, I think that it is normal and natural to have an emotional response to a tough thing that lands in your lap, whether that is a medical diagnosis, whatever that may be. I think it is normal to have an initial negative response. It is then, what do we do? What do we do to pick up the pieces, and how do we move forward? And if you are someone who believes that in general, things happen the way they are supposed to, that can give you a framework to kind of place why this happened to me. What do I do now? Because if I have to believe that this is part of God's design in some way, I'm either supposed to learn something from it, it's supposed to bring me closer to Him, perhaps because I need to lean on Him in this way. What is it that I am supposed to glean from this experience that will make me stronger at the end of it?
One of the things that I don't want to use the word struggle with, because that may be too big a word, but I ask myself often when I'm in a negative experience, am I being accepting? Am I being an accommodationist? Or am I being authentic when I smile at somebody because they have just rejected me? They've just maybe even insulted me. And very often what I do, Dr. Woods, Olier, is I look them in the face and I smile and I thank them. And I say, you are my blessing today. Just like I'm looking at you right now, I say, you are my blessing today. And very often the person's totally confounded.
I'm sure they would be.
Totally confounded. I had that experience in New Zealand. Not long ago, we took a church trip there. I had 30 plus people to go to New Zealand, Australia, and then we ended up in Fiji. But my wife and I and some of the people with us, when we split up, got rejected for being admitted to restaurants because the official line was, well, you didn't have a reservation. But in many of these cases, there's nobody else in the restaurant. And I would just smile at the people at one place in New Zealand, I smiled at the maitre d', and I said, "Thank you. You are my blessing today." And the guy looked totally confounded. The waitress next to him looked at me, and made me feel like I was in the South. She said, "If you just go out this back door, down the steps, you'll see some white tables. If you go to that restaurant, they will seat you." She didn't say, "Go there and ask them for a seat." She said, "They will seat you." And I said, "Man, I feel like I'm in the South, before the Civil Rights Movement." And but my question to myself was, am I being an accommodationist? Am I being authentic? When I smile at a person and refuse to let myself get angry, but as my godfather in New Orleans would say, but I try to get smart. And how does a person know when they're really being authentic, or are we just pushing something under the rug that maybe we ought to be dealing with?
I think it depends on what your goal is. And so it sounds like on this trip, your goal was to find a place for you and the other travelers to eat. And so there could be a world where you put out your finger and you wagged it at these people and accused them for the various hypotheses you had for why they may not have seated you. We have to then think, okay, what would that have achieved? So if our goal is our group needs to eat, then that can't happen here. Honestly, we don't want it to happen here. Like you said, that is a blessing. It's a blessing that they said no at the door instead of you sitting down to eat with people that did not want to break bread with you. You receiving food from people that did not want you in their establishment. And paying them for it. We definitely don't want that. And so it's about your goal. So if your goal, I feel like sometimes people will have as a goal to somehow change the minds and hearts, I guess, of this maitre d'.
Well, Dr. Crystal Woods, Olier, we're about out of time, but thank you again for being with me and sharing some positive thoughts about emotional wellness from the perspective of the Ruth and Boaz story in the Bible. And for those of you who are watching this, thanks so much. This is a new ministry. I would appreciate your support. Take a look at the 1-800 number on the screen and call. I have people standing by right now who will pray for you. And I thank you so much. And remember, I am praying for you. God bless.
Thank you for watching today's program. We hope you've been blessed in a powerful way. Just knowing you took the time to watch today's broadcast is a great encouragement to Pastor Nick Hood. If this broadcast has been a blessing to you, we ask that you mail a tax-free donation to Nicholas Hood Ministries at 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.